5:29 PM on March 20th, 2013. Mr. Foster? Would you please lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Will you please do the roll call? Thank you, Pavel.
Relax, settle down.
Chairperson Spray,
Present.
Vice Chair Choma,
Yes, here.
Commissioner Lucas,
Partially here.
Commissioner Palacios.
Aquí, yo estoy.
Okay, still here.
I apologize, I made a typographical error on Commissioner Lucas's name. Had he not resigned and then rescinded his resignation, it would not have been necessary.
My therapist explained it to me. No, it's okay.
Matt,
We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
yes, we do have a quorum. Would you like me to make that announcement before the Pledge of Allegiance or
Please.
after? Okay. All the commissioners, I helped Dinah and Rudy, since Rudy is not here, I helped Dinah Gonzalez, the assistant in planning, do the minutes for this time. And it's very confusing because we don't identify ourselves before we speak and/or we don't wait till I say, Commissioner Palacios, do you have something to say, and so forth. It's very hard for her to translate, so we should be more careful in identifying who we are if we haven't been called on by name. That she would be, it would help her a lot. And that's what I wanted to say. Now may we pledge the allegiance to the flag, Matt?
I pledge allegiance.
United States of, are we doing
Go
this?
ahead, yes.
And
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Matt.
That was
That was Marika, and
I
that's
think-
echo, in case it goes in the minutes.
It's like being the only one singing happy
We
birthday.
followed the arbiter.
All right, has everyone had a chance to look over the agenda? And if so, does anyone have any additions or deletions? Matt?
Madam Chair, I have one addition to matters from staff. I have a partial answer to your question of the last meeting regarding the chairperson's ability to make a motion.
Okay, great.
If you want to state it, he's going to just put it in the agenda.
It'll be a very brief statement now or later, if you care.
How about now?
I read the bylaws of the Historic Preservation Commission. It does say that the chair can vote, all members can vote. It is completely silent about who can or cannot make a motion. I have a fat book, frankly, on Robert's Rules of Order. I chose not to review that question. I'm afraid the bylaws are silent. I stated last time that I believe the chair could make a motion knowing that the chair can vote, but until such time we can clarify that, I would suggest the chair not make a motion. Or the role of the chair would be to call for a motion from the commissioners.
That's fine. Since you're leaving, does everyone know Matt's leaving town employee on March 31st?
It's another rumor.
Well,
It was. I would like to add that I was fortunate enough to be able to find the bylaws in my own archives, and in fact, it is not addressed at all.
right, I did the same thing. So, go ahead.
May I?
Mr. Chairman Palacios, would you please
This is-
speak now?
Chairman, just
I mean,
ordinary
Commissioner, I'm sorry,
citizen
Commissioner, I'm sorry,
Palacios.
I'm sorry, yeah.
What do they call it? They call it a commissioner, yeah.
Yeah,
I looked it up, and Robert's Rules of Order are lenient, become more lenient depending on the size of the organization. And I would say we were at the smaller size, so some of those rules are waived. As it gets larger,
Yes.
the meetings and so forth, they can become more unruly. Usually, that is the nature of it.
Yeah.
The chair only is a tiebreaker and usually does not make motions, but in a less formal setting, it's perfectly fine to do so. I looked it up myself.
What is the pleasure of the commission on this subject, since the bylaws are silent?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Lukes.
I think that the chair ought to refrain from making motions, giving a chance to the commissioners first. And in the absence, no brilliant ideas are coming from the body of the commission, then the chair proceeds with making a motion in case that the chair has an idea to how to proceed on any given item. But first, the commissioners should have the chance to.
Matt, Mr. Foster.
I've seen it happen in other commissions that the chair often makes a recommendation to the commission as a possible solution or a decision on the application or the issue, and then whether or not a commissioner is willing to take that recommendation and turn it into a motion is a separate thing, but that may be an appropriate role for the chair.
I think
Right.
it's not a good idea to deprive ourselves of the wisdom of the chair by denying him the right to make a motion.
Well, when I reviewed the bylaws, if I may today, there was a reference to a 5-person commission, and under the paragraph for voting, all 5 commissioners, regardless of whether chair or vice chair, were considered one person equal vote. And there's, at this point in the bylaws, no differentiation whether that commissioner also is a chair or not, because all 5 need to vote. It's really a matter of putting forth or initiating a motion. Usually a motion is initiated after discussion by all 5, all commissioners on a subject anyway. So right now, we might want to look at this if we feel that we want to further define it, okay? Because right now, the way it reads is that anyone can make that motion, including chair or vice chair, after appropriate discussion and public commentary and so forth. I don't know where it deprives or changes the voting rights to
Right.
initiate a motion.
We established that, Commissioner Toma, and then we moved on based on what Commissioner Palacios had researched and then what Commissioner Luke suggested. That's kind of how we've been running it so far. I'm totally comfortable with that. If everyone is, how about if we decide that we're gonna do it that way and Matt, I don't wanna change the bylaws at this point, but do we need to make a motion and a second and a vote on whether we operate this way, or can we just have a gentle person's agreement that that's how we're doing it? Because I don't wanna push this on to the next agenda, because Brian James doesn't like that.
I would leave that up to you, honestly, if this is something that you'd like to have the commission take formal action on, whether the chair can or cannot, should or should not.
Yeah, is everyone okay if we just agree to roll that way, and I will, and.
I don't think we're changing anything. I think we just looked this up for clarity, and I think.
Right, but if we wanted it written into the bylaws, then we'd have to be more.
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay, is everyone comfortable with that? I am.
Sure.
I am
Okay, good, new rules, we're good. Okay, thank you for sitting through that, Matt, but I wanted to make sure that was established because it had been mentioned at the last meeting. All right, we're back to approving the agenda, and Matt, we do no longer need to add that to the agenda because we just took care of it. So does anyone else have any changes or?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Commissioner Lukes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Choma. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. All right, approval of meeting minutes for the minutes of the February 20th, 2013 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at those? I wasn't here, so I'm not going to be able to vote on that.
I thought you'd help decipher them.
Huh? I did look through them. I did help decipher them.
I would like to comment. There's some minor typo, but on page, it always says page one of. Anyway, it's on the second to the last page. At the top of the page, it was that I had asked the town attorney to visit us, if he would. And I said that, I'm quoted as saying, he, meaning Palacios, didn't want negativity from the community, and I wanted to add, whether it's implied or specific, or put in quotation, in parentheses, that concerning the Historic Commission, because we all catch flack from the community anyway.
Okay, so would anyone have any trouble with adding that to your notes? Okay, let's change that on our minutes, and I'll have Dinah change it, or Matt. Matt, would you like me to have Dinah change that? Take that off your
I
plate?
would appreciate that.
Okay,
Madam Chair, I have something as well.
all right, Commissioner Lukes, what is it?
Under item 5, the HBC 2013-1, at the bottom, Commissioner Lukes made a motion to approve agenda item number 5A. I think it should add or say, based on findings of facts and staff recommendations. It wasn't just made a motion to approve. It had additional verbiage, and I think it's important to have that in the minutes, because if it ever undergo scrutiny, that part would be missing, that it was based on findings of facts and staff recommendations.
Okay, I've so noted my copy. Matt, I'll tell Dinah to add that to the record also.
Thank you.
Okay? No problem. Thank you both. All right.
I'm okay.
You're okay? So do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the February 20th meeting?
So moved.
Commissioner Lukes moved to
I
approve.
second.
And Commissioner Palacios seconded the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. All right, number 5, final public hearings. Matt?
Thank you. This is, first, we don't have anyone here signed in for public hearing, but this being a public hearing, I will read the rules of public hearing in case someone from the public comes in and wants to be heard.
Thank you.
Please bear with me. So the rules for public hearings. In order to conduct an orderly and impartial public hearing, the chair will preside and make all rulings for testimony given at tonight's meeting. The Historic Preservation Commission members have received and reviewed extensive materials regarding each application before the commission tonight, including the application and all related documentation, staff reports, and any letters in the file either supporting or opposing the application. The following rules apply. All persons wishing to speak must first sign the speakers list and will be called in this order. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the commission. Speakers representing other persons will be allowed 5 minutes. The speakers must show written documentation that they represent someone else. The chair will allow cross-examination or rebuttal if the chair feels it is pertinent to the findings presented. The chair will not tolerate shouting or unruly conduct and may direct the sergeant at arms to have any person removed from the meeting for cause. The chair will then close the public hearing and allow the commission to deliberate the pending action to be taken based on findings presented by staff and by the public. The commission may approve, deny, approve the conditions, or postpone the decision to a subsequent meeting announced by the commission. The chair will then call for a question, and voting will take place as to how to proceed on the application. Any aggrieved by the action of the commission may file an appeal pursuant to the appeals procedures set forth in the Town of Taos Land Use Development Code. The appeal must be filed within 10 working days of the decision. All cases will be heard on their own merits and do not create a precedent for other applicants.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing.
If I could, Chair, just give a very brief summary of my recommendation on this item of revisions to the Land Use Development Code to streamline. My recommendation is that this ordinance be denied by the Planning and Zoning, or excuse me, the Historic Preservation Commission. Frankly, as I reported last time, I'm not entirely comfortable with all the recommendations that were presented in the first draft. And also since then, we've been able to successfully select a planning consultant to work with the town This group was hired after the recommendation from a committee that reviewed the proposals. This was coming down from a directive ultimately from the town council and wanting to find monies in our budget to help the planning department streamline our business procedures, and that of course leads into recommendations on the land use development code. So my preference and my recommendation is that ultimately this draft ordinance be denied, that we end the public hearing process and allow the time for these consultants to work with the staff. And there are in their contract scope of work, once it's signed, will be required to come back and give a presentation to the Historic Preservation Commission with staff, with their recommendations. I'd just like to avoid this continual process of postponing the public hearing. So that's why I'm recommending that we deny it. And then if we were to move forward with recommendations, we'll be coming back with this consultant recommendations in just a few more months anyway. So for those reasons, I would recommend that you deny the amendments.
Both of them, or just
I'm
A?
talking about the land use development
Uh-huh.
code, streamlining revisions. I also wanted to point out that wasn't too long ago that we went through this process also in terms of revising the design guidelines and clarifying the approval procedures and adjusting the land use development code for administrative approvals and public hearings. So I feel we've already gone through a fairly healthy exercise in doing this. I know there was some recommendations for further streamlining to require only a single public hearing and so forth. But I studied those code amendments, and as I reported last time, had some difficulty with the lack of clarity in some of the definitions and some of the terms about a major modification and returning to its original state. And those aren't terms that I've seen typically in kind of the historic preservation profession. And so for those reasons, I request that you deny the ordinance and that we close the public hearing process to allow additional time for these consultants to work with the staff and represent a new set of recommendations. And then once those recommendations are done, then we advertise a public hearing, have a public hearing. So I feel like I've frankly been trying to catch up, so.
So again, you're suggesting to close the public hearing on 5A, but not 5B?
Correct. Well, I will be recommending the same thing, but for 5B, I have a presentation for you.
Okay. Well, who did the town hire to do the planning?
They're not under
Planning
contract
department?
yet, but it's a firm from Albuquerque called ARC Consultants.
Mm-hmm.
We got, I believe, 6 proposals, and myself, Rachel Romero, and Rudy Perea from the staff met and read them, evaluated them according to the selection criteria, and we were strongly unanimous that ARC had the best proposal. I think you'll be quite pleased. I sent the scope of work to them, they reviewed it, they sent it back, and the contract is now being circulated for signature.
All right, thank you. What's the pleasure of the commission on this item?
How long is this going to take? Because as you well know, this streamlining and the proposed changes have been under advisement forever.
Yes,
That's
We
right.
thought we were close, and then now we're not close.
yeah. Well, it is unfortunate that Mr. Morris left with the draft and it was advertised as a public hearing. I'm leaving on next Friday. If the contract were to be signed today, it would be 4, perhaps 5 months until they were back here presenting their recommendation.
Well, too bad, but we might as well do it right.
Any other input from the commission? No?
So I move to deny,
Matt?
This is a public hearing, so you need to
close the public.
formally open it to
I did
comment.
open it.
Oh, you did?
I
Oh,
opened it.
okay.
So you gotta close it.
I'm gonna close it now since I see no one who wants to speak anyway on this issue. The formal public hearing on item 5A is now closed. And you need no further assistance from us on 5A at this time, is that correct?
Just it is a public hearing, so I believe the standard is to have a roll call vote on a motion and a second and a roll
Okay.
call vote.
Thank you. Well, you want to make a motion?
As much as it pains me
It's a bad thing to have you do it.
to,
Commissioner Lukes is going to make a motion at this time.
to deny the approval of the proposed changes to the land use code and focus on hiring an appropriate consultant. That it is.
I second it.
Commissioner Choma seconded that motion. Matt, will you do a roll call, please?
Chairperson Spray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Choma,
Very good.
Yes, yes, aye.
Commissioner Lucas,
Yes.
Commissioner Palacios.
Oh, I'd like to abstain.
That's kind of how I felt too.
Well, I mean, on one side, we're getting pressure, and the other side, we're, you know, it's controversy, and they've already hired somebody.
No,
I mean-
they haven't.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
He already hired somebody, right?
The firm was selected, but the contract has not been signed yet.
Oh, okay, so, but, I mean, the wheels are in motion.
Correct.
It still passes, right? You don't need my vote. I can abstain.
Yes, you can. I'm very proud of you for doing that. All right, so now for 5B, am I get to open another public hearing for this one?
If you would, I'd like to make this presentation about the proposed changes as they are in this draft right now, and then open the public hearing for any public comment.
Okay,
If there are none, close the public hearing, take questions from the commissioners, and then entertain a motion.
okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
I have had the chance to work on the sign code and have a number of recommendations for your consideration. A lot of this presentation is dealing with signs that are applicable throughout the whole town. There are a number that are specific to the Historic Preservation Commission, so I'd like to give that presentation and ask for your comment and feedback. So here we go. The main purposes of this, the sign code and for the town's effort in revising the sign code is to encourage business development through signs and advertisements, to promote compatible design within signs on one property and with one street or one particular district. Also to protect public safety from signs that are obstructing traffic or pedestrian movement, that are a distraction to pedestrians and vehicle traffic. And then also to give us more enforceability, give our code enforcement officer and the code administrator more ability to enforce the requirements of the code. In this new draft, there are basically two main types of signs that would be permitted, meaning that you have to come in and fill in an application, pay a fee. We review the application, and then if the application and the proposed sign meets all the requirements, then we issue the permit and they go ahead and build. So there's two types of basic signs, what we're calling a permanent sign, and a permanent sign is either a mounted or a freestanding sign. A mounted sign is something that's permanent and mounted on a wall or a building. A freestanding sign is something that's permanent but somewhere else on the lot. It's, well, freestanding, it's not attached to a building. Then the other main type of sign is the temporary sign, and there's two types of temporary signs. Those are banners and the A-frame. And you can see the banners all over, and the A-frame type that are also visible throughout the community. I would back up a little bit and say, in my opinion, in reviewing this and studying this and being out in the field, I don't mind saying that I think the town of Taos is frankly littered with signs. It's a big problem. I've researching this, I've dug up some old emails and the files, and there's a handful of community members' comments about how we have to do something about all those banners. We have to do something about all those A-frame signs that that are popping up because they're obstructing traffic, they're in the way of vehicles and parking lots. They're unsightly, they're too big, they're falling over. You know, we're getting in the windy season, and personally today I saw 2 of them that were blown over by the wind. Many of them are in the sidewalk where they're not allowed to be. Many businesses have more than 1, 2, 3, and I've approached some of them about that, and they knowingly, deliberately, willingly violate the code just to wait for us to enforce it. They put it out on the street just because they want it, and they're willing to, you know, just knowingly, again, violate the code for the added little boost they think they might be getting in business through vehicular traffic and so on. So I think it is a really big problem from a safety standpoint and from an aesthetic standpoint. There's just way too many of these banners and A-frames all over the community. You may not share that opinion, but I think it's my responsibility to bring that to you and explain some of my background and why we're recommending what we are in terms of the limits of particularly the temporary signs. So again, those are the 2 types of signs that are permitted, a permanent and then a temporary for each type of business. Some of the design requirements for all those types of signs is that any single business is only allowed 3. Or they can have, for example, 2 permanent sign and 1 temporary sign. So we're trying to allow some flexibility of choice of the business owner, but also limit the number of signs that they can have so that our commercial corridors, for example, are not just cluttered with signs. So for example, any single business can have three permanent signs, but they won't be allowed to have a temporary sign, a banner or an A-frame. They can have, for example, a permanent freestanding sign out on their property. They can have 2 on their wall or on their building, but no more than 3 permanent signs. But if they have 3 permanent signs, they will not be allowed to have a banner or an A-frame. They can have a combination of permanent and temporary. They can have, that's their choice. They can have 1 permanent freestanding sign, and throughout the year they can have a banner and an A-frame if they want. So we're trying to make this predictable but also flexible for the businesses. The total of these permanent signs cannot be 60 square feet. And a 40 square feet sign for a freestanding sign. The sign that might be, out on the, the back side of, not on their building, but, a monopole sign that says Taco Bell or Joe's Barbecue or something. Any single sign, freestanding, cannot be more than 60 square foot maximum. But the total of all 3 of their signs cannot be 60 square feet.
So, thank you. This is Oscar Palacios. I was looking at the write-up here. These are exceptions to the write-up?
No, these are the maximum, the design requirements for all of them.
But I mean,
All types of
this
signs.
is the law that we're trying to vote on.
I'm not asking you for a vote. In fact, I am going to recommend at the end of my presentation that you deny this for reasons I'll explain, just like we did. But I want your feedback on the types of signs, because this is a draft that ultimately be carried to the town council for consideration. It's not too late to get your comment and feedback on it.
And I have I have some comments, but just while we were proceeding though, like you put in here the height of any sign not to exceed 20 feet, and then you put 12 feet in the historic. Is that in here then?
Yes.
Okay,
There's a separate section
But you made
for
a
design requirements for signs in the historic overlay zone.
but that would be another place that it would be nice to, whenever there's an exception in these things, that they don't have one versus the other. I mean, but I'll get into that later, but I mean,
Well,
there are some contradictions in this thing.
Right. Well, there's just tighter restrictions. I wouldn't call them contradictions, just tighter restrictions for signs in the historic overlay zone.
Okay,
Like,
Alright.
for example, if you're not in the historic overlay zone, you can have a 20-foot high sign, but if you're in the historic overlay zone, you can only be 12.
absolutely,
Yeah.
okay.
Another important thing is that a wall-mounted sign is no more than 10% of the total building facade. We don't want the buildings to be dominated by big signs, so we're trying to limit that to a certain percentage of the whole building facade. Now, it could be, again, a 60 square foot sign, one sign on one wall, that they'll just get that one sign because it's their maximum of all signs for the size of sign. But if it's 60 square feet, that's as big as it can be, but it still has to be 10% less than their whole building facade. Window signs are no more than 20% of the window area. There's an image there on business, Paseo del Pueblo Norte. A lot of the businesses with, particularly the retail that have pedestrian traffic, they have shop fronts with, dominance of glass, and those windows often get cluttered and frankly littered with signs and information and posters and open and Carhartts and Uggs and burritos, and it's, in my opinion, it distracts from the architecture. So we're limiting that to 20% of the window area. That's also for a safety reason, that if something were to be happening inside that building, we want to be able to see in and see out. It doesn't say necessarily what type of information you can put. You can put for sale, you can put Uggs, you can put, 50% off throw rugs, you can put, anything you want. I Heart Lucy, or a decoration, St. Patty's Day parade poster, anything that they really want, but as long as it doesn't exceed that maximum amount. There's another type of signs that are considered and regulated and permitted. That's for multi-tenant center. A multi-tenant center is basically a strip mall or a single building that has more than one place of business in it. Albertsons Shopping Center, for example, is I think our largest one. So a multi-tenant center sign is allowed to have one wall sign like you see on a La Mariposa. That's advertising really the building. That's La Mariposa building, not necessarily individual businesses there. There's one freestanding sign like also on the Mariposa building that advertises the individual businesses within that multi-tenant center. And then they're allowed to have one directory sign that basically is, a map or the name of the businesses and arrows pointing to give the customer a direction on where to go to find that individual tenant within the multi-tenant center. There are a number of types of signs that are what we call conditionally exempt, meaning that they don't have to come in and get an application and pay a fee. And any private property owner or business is allowed to have these types of signs on their property without a fee or without a permit, provided that they meet these conditions. Most of the conditions are about the size of the sign, for example, or the location of the sign. These types of signs don't count towards the square footage or the number of signs. They're not considered one of their banners or anything like that. And these are bulletin boards. A cork board along the side of the building where you advertise yard sales and those kinds of bartered items and yoga classes and farmers markets and any number of things. Construction sign, that's typically when a contractor wants to put up a sign on a construction site. Directional sign that says, parking lot or emergency room, those kinds of signs. Entrance, exit, those kinds of signs. A drive-through menu sign, that's not considered one of the three permanent signs. That has to be cannot be on the front of the building. A menu sign is like at a fast food restaurant. You drive in and you have the sign there. Election campaign signs, garage sales, yard sales, historic or commemorative markers like a plaque on a historic building. A menu sign, those are popular in the historic overlay zone at restaurants. So if a pedestrian or a customer wants to know what their menu is at the restaurant, a memorial sign, here lies Governor Bent's decapitated body. for example. Non-commercial flags, like the state of New Mexico, for example. A picketing sign, a real estate sign, for sale, Dreamcatcher Realty, which has a few signs that are too big, but we'll deal with that. Street address, 123 Paseo del Pueblo Sur, and residential subdivision signs like you see here at the Dos Arroyos subdivision. So that's the list of signs that are exempt, provided that they meet the design requirements typically for size. If it's too big, then it has to be taken down. If it's in the wrong location, it has to be taken down, those kinds of conditions. Otherwise, they're exempt and don't have to be permitted. The fully exempt signs, meaning that these entities and these types of signs, there's no conditions on them. A government school or hospital, those government schools and hospitals are for the most part out of our jurisdiction, and I think hospitals for reasons of emergency access and helicopters and emergency vehicles and those kinds of purposes why we're making hospitals exempt. I've been told by Rachel that Holy Cross has been very good with the town in terms of communicating with the town about signage, and we drove by there, and personally I didn't see anything offensive or too big or unsightly about their signs. Government wayfinding, like the signs that are around the historic district to point out the landmarks and the cultural attractions and facilities and museums, those kinds of things. And those signs required by law. For example, when we require a property owner to put up a poster on their property that advertises a public hearing. Traffic detours, road closures, those kinds of things. Prohibited signs, these are ones that you just can't do no matter what. Signs that flash, blink, rotate, vary, attention-grabbing types of signs. Signs that move, signs that have audio devices, billboards, which are basically a sign that's bigger than the standard and off-site, like you see on in El Prado and other places in the county that do allow billboards. They're quite large, and they're advertising a business somewhere else. This is one that I would really like your feedback on, because they are everywhere, frankly, and I consider this, I don't know how you feel about it, but we're calling them a commercial flagpole signs. It's like that image right there for Verizon. There's several of them popping up around the community that we are considering to just ban it completely. I'm seeing
I support that.
shaking heads, yes.
So do I.
Okay.
I've had members of the community call me saying, can you do something about those?
Yeah, because the other option was to consider them one of the temporary signs. Inflatable signs, anything that's inflatable. It doesn't include balloons. I just didn't go there with balloons, because sometimes you see a balloon on top of a sign. Just let that one go. Commercial sign walker signs, that's like you have an A-frame, like a board on your body that says, burrito special or something like that. That's prohibited. So if we see anybody dressed in a Mexican wrestler mask and a sign hung to their body, then they'll be asked to stop.
Even if they're itinerant vendors and it's less than 10% of their body mass?
If you would like to make that exception in the historic
Well,
district.
I personally don't think sign walker signs are, I think they're kind of, they can be kind of charming in a community. But what about for itinerant vendors? Do these signs, how do they apply
The way
to
this
them?
is right now, if they have a sign advertising their business and it's hung on their body, then they would not be able to do it.
So can they not have signs, itinerant vendors? Can they not have them if they have no building facade?
I honestly, this is silent on that. It doesn't mention anything about itinerant vendors. Yeah, like the push carts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be addressed.
That's a good point.
How do others of you feel about the?
I know
these
some I've
sign
seen, I
walker
think they have
signs?
A-frame signs.
Uh-huh.
In many cases, I've seen their menu on their push cart, But a commercial sign walker sign would be, I don't know if they have a huge button on them or something. I don't know what that would quite look like, but.
What does the commission think about this issue?
Doesn't bother me. What I'm having trouble with here is what of this stuff applies to the historic and what applies to the town in general? And you showed photographs or pictures on the monitor of these gas stations, and they're completely out of these. They're taller than 20 feet. They're backlit. They're huge.
I don't have a slide for those, Commissioner, but I will review on page 9 what those added restrictions for signs are in the historic.
But you showed
overlays.
photos of them when you started. I was just wondering, okay, all right, we'll talk about them still. Okay, fine.
Okay, so before we get off this other thing, are you going to add that concern to your list before you take it to council? The push cards and
Yes.
the itinerant
Well, if-
vendors?
Yes.
And
correct.
I personally do not know why signs that you wear on your body would be excluded. They're kind of fun, but whatever, I don't know what y'all
I'm
think.
okay with those.
Yeah, well, they go, there's one where you have it on your body, and then, I've been to some of these towns and stuff, and you got these guys with these signs that they're flipping around in the air and putting them in your face, and, even there seems to be kind of a need to put constraints on how much you can do. A person walking around with a sign, unless he's wheeling it around and knocking people down, but they keep going. That's my concern.
This is a good example of how the sign code, which seems so simple on the surface, gets really messy real quick.
Right,
When I was doing this, I thought of, well, what about the nonprofit that has the car wash at the Southside People's
Right.
Bank? You
right.
see the kids holding car wash. That's a
Yeah.
commercial sign walker. It says, gotta go.
Really?
Are we gonna
Well,
prohibit that?
That
So
doesn't bother me.
then we start making exceptions to what seems like a clear-cut kind of rule. Then there's exceptions to the rules, and then there's geographical, so it does get complicated quite quickly, and this is a good
Well-
example of one, so that's.
Once again, though, it also has to do with where it is. If it's in front, like at a bank way south of town, or in town, but south of the historic, we don't even have much say. If it's happening,
Correct.
in the.
Appreciate your comments on those signs and the
our
historic
stuff is,
overlay
I
zone.
think, what I'm trying to focus on is the things that relate to us.
Correct.
Because I think there's a difference, because you're outside of the historic, from the south of town, is out of control, in my opinion. I mean, in terms of signage, in terms of buildings, ordinances, it's blighted. So,
Matt,
but I mean, isn't that kind of out of our purview? I mean, I'm trying to keep it contained.
If
is what I'm
you
saying.
feel like strongly about some item that's in this draft code that's general to all signs, by all means, that's why I'm here. I'll do
Okay.
my best next week to convey those concerns to the council.
Okay, thank you. I just
Yeah,
trying to.
Matt, you didn't finish, we have a different screen now, and you didn't, there you go.
sorry.
So commercial signs, but you could just walk around with a sign that isn't commercial on your body?
Correct, that would be like a picketer, for example.
Yeah, right. Okay, I think, I don't know how you're gonna get by if some little brownie troop wants to do a car wash. How are they gonna get people to know they're having a car wash without holding the sign?
Right. There's a provision in here for non-commercial kind of community events. You see like the Taos Shorts Film
Mhm.
Festival, those kinds of things.
Well, a
Um,
car wash is a commercial thing, but it's usually for a nonprofit.
Yeah, nonprofits also make money. They make profit on
Right.
events.
Right,
They use those profits for a public purpose. So another example of who's to judge what, the purpose really is. Is it a bona fide nonprofit? Is it just a fundraiser for a local soccer team? What is it really? And, how do we make that judgment out in the field, especially if it's on a Sunday afternoon when staff isn't here?
Well, I think we try to do the best we can. I mean, to just say that the car wash sign is commercial, therefore it can't exist, is like we're just writing law. That's a laughing stock. I mean, I encourage the kids to do stuff. I
Right.
mean, and I
Okay.
support them as much as I can, and I'll buy brownies or whatever,
Me
or
too.
those cookies.
Is it too complicated to make an exception to that number 7? For things like bake sales, car washes? How would you want to handle that? Because I really feel too like it's against what we're all trying to do here to prevent like a youth group from having a bake sale and advertising it.
Well, I think the draft, it is difficult. I've tried and reviewed it, and I'm not sure, frankly, how to deal with that at this point, because like we have, for example, the current code says, I'm sorry, I forget the exact language, but like if a nonprofit wanted to have some sort of event, like a car wash or a film festival or a bake sale or some fundraising activity, the code says they can put a reasonable amount. How many is reasonable? How many? I mean,
Right.
they're in the right of way. They're posted on utility boxes. They're, otherwise in violation of many other sections of the code, and they're frankly all over the place.
Okay, well, yeah, it is, and that's, when I even read this thing, it's ongoing, and that's why we've been delaying on so much of this stuff. It is difficult, but boy, I'd rather have a car wash sign any day than these gas station
I do
against
too.
the wall
I think
things.
this is like over-regulating. There's too much government in this. If we're talking about a kid's car wash or a bake sale for some group, I just think it shouldn't be hard for them to be able to do that. That's how those groups raise money. And maybe you wanna say 3 signs maximum, or, put some limits on it. Not hang them where flyers are not allowed, which is a lot of places. I really think that there's, I think it's gone one step too far. Myself. And I think Commissioner Palacios agrees. Marika, Commissioner Choma, what do you think?
Well, there's a part of me listening to this that understands that it's difficult to draw a line, because by definition, we have to generalize to some degree. So I think that we're focused right now on an image of children holding, car wash signs for, some benefit, right, over a weekend. At the same time, there has to be a way to exempt that or use the proper language that is specific to that one image, or else we also might have a situation of various other persons for different reasons cluttering up a sidewalk, or for, in support of different objectives. And part of what's going on here is to remove clutter and remove busyness or obstructions or distractions to traffic. So, I'm just suggesting that, I'm understanding that on a larger scope, some just appropriate judgment needs to be used by whoever it is that's enforcing. I'm just asking whether it's possible to be that specific. And I understand what we're talking about. I don't know that we've gone too far, because you don't want to take a sign away from a child holding a car wash sign, but I can also see, live human beings running around with signs in different applications, and then that is something that you might want to control or keep down.
Matt, do people get permits for bake sales and car washes and so on? No? There's no regulation at all?
Other than say there will be a reasonable amount, and I think right now it's 2 or 3 days before the event, and they have to be removed a few days after the event, but it says a reasonable amount, and
Well, can we add for those instances, a maximum of 3 signs or something like that? So it
Yes.
doesn't get to be, and make sure that they're up the day before and down the day, right? Quickly, however, as quickly as possible, they should be.
For instance, how does another application of live human beings running around with signs or showing them would be around voting time, political
But
signs?
that's not, we're talking about
They're
commercial
exempt.
signs right now.
Yeah, but how did we get to kids holding a car wash sign?
the
Because
the prohibition on commercial sign
number
walkers.
7.
Yeah. So the question is,
Yeah,
well, does that
commercial
include
sidewalk
someone
signs.
Election
who
signs
is
are already
having a
exempt.
commercial event, like a fundraiser, but it's
Right.
benefiting a nonprofit, and they say car wash?
Uh-huh.
In the way it reads, I would consider that a commercial sign walker, but we need to make an exemption, and there is an exemption to these kinds of signs right now, but reasonable amount and those kinds of things. Like I give the other example of Taos Short Film Festival that's going on or was going on, and you see those signs in the right of way, posted to utility boxes, otherwise not allowed where they are. So it's becomes difficult to enforce, and then, so I'm looking for the feedback on what's a reasonable amount. I hear 3, and then, a period of days before and after the event.
Well, let me.
And they're off-site, the TCA, for example, will have the Taos Short Film Festival. Well, we want to allow them as a community nonprofit to put those posters elsewhere, not just on the TCA. So when you're driving at Gusdorf and Cruz Alta, oh yeah, there's a film festival this
Mhm.
weekend.
Mhm.
But that it not be blowing in the wind, in the street, taped. I'm not picking on the TCA, it's just, I know that was one that has caught
Right.
my
Well,
eye
listen,
lately.
But that's a good,
Right.
that's a good example.
It's something, the bake sale is stapled to the utility pole, we gotta be able to take it down and limit it to whatever you think is reasonable, because one of the intentions that kicked off this whole thing months ago was the current code gives too much discretion to the code administrator, like to say, well, what's a reasonable amount?
Right.
I make,
I understand that. I think we should nail it down more, but I also think in this town and many, many other towns, those kind of kids events that's how they raise money.
Mhm.
And it would be a shame to.
This
interfere
code,
with
this draft doesn't address that. I intentionally left it for this discussion.
Mhm.
Exempt. I think
'Cause-
they should be exempted from
Exempt.
it, and that's the end of it.
There you go.
And the
know.
nonprofit are exempt.
So a nonprofit could have a 120 square foot sign in a vacant piece of property for a fundraiser, for example.
Is that,
Yes. They will never do that, so, it's a far-fetched.
They could have 20 signs along a road on private property, not regulated on private property.
If nonprofit has that kind of money to create 20 signs, more power to them.
Okay.
There's a curiosity with all this that brings to mind, and that is what about the Taos News and this vendor on every street corner in the middle of the road? Is that cool? I mean, I don't know. No, I mean, it's not a matter like you pull over, or, I mean, like what's going on with that? I mean,
Part of the culture.
oh, okay, well, all this is part of the culture.
No, this is part of the culture and means of people making money, and I think we should stay away from that.
Well, okay, we can stay away from that, but I'm just saying, it's also, there's no ruling on it, it's pretty much,
Right, but
and it's new, it's new, it's not, it wasn't prolific 20 years ago.
Yeah, As the chairperson,
Well, but you say it's cultural.
I do.
Well,
Because the chair says, you know, too much government is too much government, and you gotta draw the line somewhere, and I certainly would draw the line with nonprofits and newspaper vendors.
Okay. Maybe excused, I'm out of here. We're gonna go round and round, and it's, we're gonna,
Well, I
vote to
don't think
table
it's
probably.
productive to go around and round, and so,
You may, if you
where are
wanna
we
go.
at?
I did,
Okay.
yeah. This is not the first time we've kicked around the sign stuff, and then we're really gonna possibly vote to table it also.
No, we just gotta give the staff some direction here.
I
and
think
that's all it's
we're
about.
almost done with this,
Yeah.
aren't we?
So do I.
Yeah, and but
I have a couple more
mentioned earlier-
items,
Yeah.
and then I'm gonna review the list of additional requirements for
ask
signs in the historic overlay zone, and then I will request that you deny this, because I
Yeah.
wanna, it's been advertised, I think, since December,
Sure.
and.
Okay, and can you just, for the record, let us know, what are you gonna say on number 7? Bye, Oscar, thank you so much. See you next time.
If your recommendation is to allow a commercial sign walker for a for-profit business, someone to hang a sign on their body and walk around, right now, the draft is that that's not allowed. If someone is doing that to advertise a business, the code
For
enforcement
profit.
officer, you can't do that, you need to stop. But if it's for a nonprofit, a special event, they can do it however many times they want, wherever they want, but they can only do it, 2 days before, and, you know, they have to stop
Right.
walking. And obviously, no one's gonna walk around to advertise an event that happened yesterday. but
Right.
They're allowed to do it maybe for a couple of days, or maybe
Right.
a sign walker the day of the, because we're talking about two things. If
Right,
someone's walking around for a car wash, and that's not really advertising a business, but for me, it brought up that question, is
Mhm.
that a really commercial activity? It's on a commercial property, probably it's silent right now and probably wouldn't go there, but in some ways, we could see how that could be considered a,
Mhm.
you know,
So it sounds to me like you
Fundraising.
understand the wishes of this commission perfectly.
I believe I do.
Okay, thanks,
And I will convey that to the town council next Tuesday.
thanks.
well, I just
Uh,
want to say that in general, you know, I support the way it's written at this time. And especially because we have a differentiation between commercial and nonprofit. And the image of a child, you know, kind of, or a one-time event to raise money for some sort of a school project, be a car washes. I don't know that I personally would categorize, that's a fundraiser to me. It kind of is closer to a nonprofit situation. We're not talking about a permanent commercial application. So I'm not seeing a problem with this personally.
Perfect. All right, would you go on, please? Thank you.
Sure, and then again, the signs, you can just prohibited, that says stop danger, or something to kind of mislead the public, or that appears to be like a government sign, a traffic control sign, for example. Anything that's considered to be, you know, unsafe or obstructing pedestrians, and there's more details about the height over a
Right.
walkway and those kinds of things. If there's nails sticking out and it's hanging by a thread, for example. Some of the other highlights that's been coming up more recently is signs in the right-of-way. This draft is completely silent on that because we don't have a working definition of right-of-way. There's a difference between the state highway right-of-way and county roadway right-of-way and town right-of-way, and the issue of the lack of right-of-way maps and our ability, as we know from Mr. Northrop, frankly, is can't pinpoint precisely on every road where the right-of-way is by some verified, survey. We've talked about this quite a bit in the town's inability to enforce signage in the highway right-of-way. Now, the town right-of-way is another thing where we know we don't have clearly delineated right-of-way maps to refer to in the office when we see a sign that we think is in the right-of-way on Gusdorf. What we're thinking about doing at this point, and again, this draft is silent on that, is saying 9 feet from the edge of the pavement. So if you have a roadway that has just asphalt, no sidewalk, so 9 feet from the edge of that pavement and back is going to be defined as the right-of-way. If if there's a sidewalk, 9 feet from the edge of the sidewalk. Those kinds of things that we're still working out, which is probably the main reason why I have to ask you to deny it. I need to work with the legal department and get feedback from the town council to really address this issue because it's unresolved. And I can't ask you to say yes or no or maybe and forward it to the town council knowing that these issues are unresolved. So that's why I'm saying let's deny this, end this continuing public hearing thing because the public loses interest. And that's the issue is that, well, maybe you say, yeah, and no one's here because, well, they keep on denying it. That's the issue we were talking about last time.
Matt,
Yes.
have you looked at the sign ordinances from other towns like Santa Fe?
I have not personally read them. Rachel Romero has reviewed them and gotten some ideas on these items. Yeah.
That'd be a good idea to.
Yeah, I have a couple copies and I haven't had the time to study them. Rachel has looked at them because I've worked with her very closely on many of these issues because she's the person to go out and enforce it and review the application and issue the permits and collect the fees, but.
So maybe there are some good ideas we can.
For sure.
plagiarize.
Yeah. The fee structure, just very briefly, permanent signs, $47 minimum plus a $2 per square foot, whichever is greater. A banner, a one-time fee of $25. One important thing to know that we're recommending in the banners or the temporary signs is that you can only have one, and that you can only have it twice a year, and that there must be 30 days in between the time frame that you have the banner or the A-frame out there. So you can't just have a banner waving in the parking lot 365 days a year. Try and manage that to bring them in and limit the amount of time that a business can have a banner or an A-frame. And then this would be the fee.
So if you have an A-frame as one of your 3 signs
Correct.
on your business, you can't leave it out there continually?
That's correct.
Why?
To manage the amount of temporary banners and A-frames that are out on the street now.
Some A-frames are not, some of them are not temporary.
By definition, here they are. They're movable. They're not meant to be permanent, like
Right, they're not attached.
mounted
So-
to a wall or fixed to the ground.
So you would have to leave it, you put it out one time, take it in for a month, put it out for a month?
I can only do that twice a year.
So
I
how
think-
much continual time can that sign be out?
I think it is. Says there's only if there's a 30-day lapse between the time periods, no more than 2 per year. And I don't recall, Frank, I'm sorry, off the top of my head, if it's I thought we had a 60-day period. So it can be there for 60 days, you have to remove it for 30 days, you can put it back for 60 days, and then you're done.
Okay, well, I disagree with that if it's one of the 3 that you're using for your business. If you're giving up your other sign to have that, that seems to be at a disadvantage for the business. I don't see the reason for it.
Well, but
To
it's an
limit the
inducement
amount of
to-
signs that are
permanent.
popping up, and they sit there, they stay there, they don't move them, they accumulate along the roadways. That's the idea, is to limit the number and the duration of them.
These are only signs on the road? These are not
The
like,
banners and the A-frames,
so this is only for signs on the roadway?
temporary ones for banners and for the A-frame.
Only on the roadway?
No.
Not, for example, not by my shop on a Terracina Lane, that's not a roadway?
That doesn't say, the code doesn't, the draft doesn't say about roadway or not roadway, it's just a banner, A-frame. Doesn't say if it could be in a roadway or not. Right now, a banner has to be affixed. That's another thing, is we see a lot of banners that are right now are in violation because they're just roped to a fence out in the parking lot and they're waving and they're not affixed to part of the building. That's another thing this does, is a banner has to be affixed to your building, so it can't be out there in the parking lot. It has to be on your building. The A-frame is portable, goes wherever, as long as it's not obstructing pedestrians and that kind of thing, and it doesn't say anything about the roadway or an alley, for example.
So as long as it's not obstructing the right-of-way, then it would still be
I think it
considered.
says like pedestrian access, or I think it's 7
right.
feet high above a walkway, those kind of things.
So then it could stay out and be considered one of a business's 3 signs if it was not in the,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Could stay out, I
Thank you,
can't
thank
find
you.
it, I may have honestly like not
Thank you,
addressed it.
I just want to make sure about that,
Okay.
thanks.
Appeals and a variance, if someone, an applicant, doesn't like the decision of the code administrator or the code enforcement officer, they can appeal to the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Historic Preservation Commission in the HOZ. Unsafe and non-compliant signs, there's requirements that, there's 3 levels. If it's deemed to be an immediate threat to health and safety, it has to be down within, I think, 2 hours. Right now, the code says, I think you have 3 days to take down a sign that's imminently dangerous to somebody. So I thought we would change that to make it more like reflective of the fact that it's an imminent danger to someone, to get it down now.
Right.
Pre-existing legal nonconformities. This is basically a sign that's already out there, already been permitted under the current code, and then what kind of changes does this draft make to make a sign then illegal, that you can't do it anymore? Well, if it's a permanent sign, you have to bring it into compliance if you replace it or you alter it, or if it's damaged. It can stay there, a sign that's too tall or too big or for whatever purpose, it can remain as a legal nonconformity until the owner decides to replace it or change it. Then they have to make it into compliance with the new requirements of the code. All temporary signs, the A-frames and the banners, have to be brought down within 30 days.
Okay.
He's almost done.
And for some reason, I can't advance the slide, but I know the next one is about the next steps. I have a presentation, the same presentation to the town council next Tuesday evening. I will bring forward to them your comments and questions, and I'm also going to, for the same reasons, ask them to put this thing to rest until we can resolve these kinds of issues. I also know that I was asked by the town manager, and I believe it's something that's been discussed for many months, and when this was first started, I think last summer or something, that it be vetted by the public, that a draft be brought to the Chamber of Commerce, to the Merchants Association, out to the public. One member of the public wants me to mail it to every business in town. So it needs to be, the draft needs to be completed with this type of input, brought out to the public for, I don't know, however long the council might see fit, revised and then brought back. And this will be, months from now. I'm not sure who would be leading the way on this, but that's the next steps and the basic process, where it would be denied, close the public hearing process with the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, the Town Council, and go through the process of collecting input, advertising it again once the draft is finished.
Well, we were involved there for a while, discussing signage and what we could envision specific to the historic district.
Correct.
And, when, under the paragraph that are special rules, regs, and restrictions for the historic overlay, we had played with the idea of neon tubing signs, and we did not proceed forward because there was apparently a difficulty in being able to communicate that into an effective code that could be enforced. And my question right now is, I think that it's still possible, once in a blue moon, someone may come up with something marvelous, but my bottom line question is, if we go ahead with what we have here, which is solid, and it is good, I think it is good, or do we still have the ability to obtain what we would call a certificate of appropriateness, it, a variation that, you know, may not comply with the rules and regs of signage as are, but someone may one of these days show up with something that is truly an asset, but by definition is not perhaps allowed by code. Is there any room at all for exceptions?
There are requirements for a variance and an appeal. A variance is allowed if it depends on what it is. If it's something that's explicitly prohibited and a
Right.
violation, you know, there's nothing, you know, it depend on the code administrator and the attorney and the applicant and whoever's really dealing with
Sure.
that. My opinion is that if it says you cannot have an inflatable sign, there's no reason to bring it for a variance. They might appeal that decision. Anyone can do that, and it would be up to the staff and the commission and the applicant at that time to say, just for an example, inflatable signs are explicitly, specifically prohibited. You cannot do it.
That's what I'm saying.
And the recommendation I would hope to the commission on that appeal hearing is that you deny the appeal. It's explicitly prohibited. Now, if somebody for some compelling reason wants to or feels like they really need to have a 14-foot sign in the historic district, even though the code says 12 feet, there's, I don't know, for whatever reason, unique to that piece of property, that might be grounds for a variance. The variance says you cannot grant any variance
Right.
above 20% of the dimensions. If they want to have a 64 square foot sign bigger for some reason, or slightly higher or taller because there's a tree or something, you know, they have an Adobe plastered wall, they don't want to put, I don't know what it might be, but it has to be unique to that.
That's what I'm referring to, that these, whether we have some sort of vehicle to still be able to have some flexibility and recognize something that we may not be aware of now, but something that in fact would be an asset. That's the only type of thing I'm discussing that may
Yeah,
not
right.
align itself
Right.
with the signage that we have now. But there's a unique situation and someone shows up and says, you know, I would like to do this, and it's a quality thing, and somehow it might defy some of these rules and regs, but in fact, have a greater overall value in what it is, and become an asset to the area. So
Commissioner-
I just wanted to investigate that, because right now we have no neon allowed, no this, you know, we have X amount of no's. And my understanding is that when we discussed this neon business, we were really trying to avoid, really, El Chipola neon signs that you can buy for, and that would
Yeah.
really, really, I mean, there's no other way that I can put it, would not be an asset. And yet, there is a variety that is an art form.
This
And
is
somehow, my understanding is that we just never could define it properly to be able to get that to work.
yeah,
in
I've
the
thought
field.
about that issue, and I described it to myself as the public sector, like the private sector is normally on the cutting edge of sign design.
Right,
You know, we from this role of the town, we're regulators. We're not sign designers.
right.
So we should allow something for that, for the private sector to be innovative and kind of push the envelope on stuff we think we like. But we also have requirements in the code, so we have to kind
Sure.
of regulate design. It's a really hard thing to do, and frankly, local government planners aren't really, I'm not a sign designer. I can't contemplate what some business may invent in the next couple of years. So what I would like to do, and I run this by the attorney, is that that as something that is not explicitly permitted and identified or defined as a monopole or internal box lit or neon or
Right.
whatever, that if it's not explicitly allowed or permitted or defined in here, that it can be done through a certificate of appropriateness if it's in the historic
Right.
overlay
All
zone,
right.
or approved by a special permit by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So there is a mechanism, so we just say you can't do it. And
Okay,
you also don't
Right.
have to go all the way through a public hearing to the town council to change the whole code, that there's a way to do that.
And you'll put that in your
I will,
recommendation.
and there's an example of what we have, it's not the greatest example, but the current code for parking, for example, there's a whole list in each zone of what you can do with your land: apartments, retail, grocery, hotel, light manufacturing, and all those specific uses have a number of parking spaces that you must have.
Right.
There's a paragraph deep in the code that says if there's a use that is not explicitly permitted in this code, a retail, a gallery, a blah, blah, et cetera, the code administrator can decide how many parking spaces you need. I wouldn't feel comfortable for the next code administrator to say, if it's not, yeah, you can just, because that's exactly the opposite. We're trying to get away from discretionary decisions of the code administrator, because if the code administrator, the next one, allows a sign under his discretion and you guys, the commission sees it in the historic district, you're gonna, we don't like that. So I think it should come to
Okay.
the commission for approval.
Right.
Thank
Matt,
you.
what will it take to get to number 6? Are we,
Number 6 of what?
number 6 on the agenda, can we, let's keep.
Oh, is
moving
that
on
the
this.
adjournment?
No, it's matters from staff. We're on
Okay.
5B now, I'm just wanting to help you.
Thank you. I'm
Center
gonna
in on
read
what's
to
going
you
on.
the specific, or summarize for you the area on page 9, special rules, regulations, and restrictions for those signs in the historic overlay zone.
Okay,
A freestanding sign cannot exceed 12 feet. Other than an internally lit menu sign, that's the box with the plastic, what the menu is, that should be internally lit. Other than those type of lit signs, an internally lit sign, a box backlit sign, an LED, time and temperature is prohibited in the HOZ. You can't have those, the lights that say 56 degrees, 9:36 PM. 56 degree, you can't have that. Can't have neon. Can't have those internal box lit signs. I'm trying to think of an example. I think like KFC, it's a frame structure inside the unit of the sign is a light. You can't have that. I need to make a note to myself because there's externally lit signs. You can do an external, the Taos Ale House has one of those signs, but there's a light on it. Unfortunately, the light is shining up. You can't do that, but you can shine the line down. So that would be an externally lit sign.
and you can have a neon sign if you get a certificate of appropriateness from.
If we were to add that provision, that anything that's not explicitly prohibited or allowed can be allowed by a certificate
Okay,
of appropriateness. It does
Okay.
say that if you have a neon tube sign, that's, unless it's pre-existing nonconformity, that it's part of a cultural property. This is frankly very specific to the Taos Inn. That would be allowed to continue. A sign may be painted on the wall of a building, provided that this total sign area does not exceed 20 square feet and consists of no more than 2 words. This is brought in from the historic overlay zone design guidelines into the sign code, so it's
Mhm.
very clear and,
mhm,
and consistent.
mhm.
Anything above that requires a certificate of appropriateness. An A-frame sign shall not exceed 4 square feet. A banner sign shall not exceed 20 square feet. An A-frame sign are prohibited in Taos Plaza. That was a recommendation of the code enforcement officer because A-frames are in the plaza are typically right in the walkway. They can go really, in very limited cases, nowhere else except the walkway. They have been there. They're prohibited in the walkway. I don't know how you feel about that, but I don't know where else, an A-frame sign would go on the plaza other than the parking lot or underneath the portals. So that's why she's suggesting that they be just not allowed.
Not under the portals?
Correct. Not on the plaza.
How about if you just say not in the right of way? Wouldn't that take care of it? What if somebody wanted to put an A-frame on the gazebo when they were
It gets back to
playing?
that, my reaction to that is that we don't know what the right of way really is. So someone could say, prove to me that I'm in the right of way. Say, well, we can't. And say, okay, then you can't enforce your code.
I don't know about that. I mean, I just don't know if that's gonna fly.
Well, this gets back to my earlier point of this draft being revised, presented to the council next Tuesday, kind of sent back to the drawing board. and brought back to the public, like the Arts and Culture District, the Taos Project, the Chamber of
Mhm.
Commerce,
Mhm.
the sign companies, the folks that make these signs. You know, we don't want to, you know, if their standard size of a banner is 20 feet, then if we make them say, well, it's 18 feet, then everyone has to buy a custom sign at added expense. We want to promote business,
Mhm.
right? And
What if you have, I mean, a push cart typically might have a menu sign or a small sign that's not over 4 square feet, a sandwich sign, while they're operating, and then they take their push cart away at night, and it's not on the right of way, it's right by their, it might be something that they need for advertisement, I'm just thinking. See, that seems too broad a stroke, I think, on the one about the plaza, I think. I don't know. I think that one's gonna, I think you're gonna have trouble with that one, is all I'm saying.
Well, let's wait, it's
Yeah.
going out to the public, so
Yeah.
let's see what the feedback is.
Yeah.
Moving on.
that's my presentation.
Questions, anyone? There's question marks.
Yeah.
Anyone
No.
questions? Nope.
Moving on.
Good. Thank you, Matt. Good luck Tuesday.
All right.
Okay, so now do we need to vote to not accept your
Correct.
work?
Yes, to close the public,
Open it and close it.
correct.
Okay, I'm gonna,
Due to your presentation, we're so appalled
we wanna,
that we're making a motion to scrap it all.
first I have to open the public hearing on this issue. As I see that there's no one, has anyone signed up
No
for
one
the
has
public
signed in
hearing?
the sign-in sheet.
Then I'm going to close the public hearing at this time, and now I would entertain a motion from either of you two to,
Moving to, what's the motion?
All
To
right.
deny the recommendations of the draft sign
Deny the
code and,
recommendations of the draft or the sign ordinance,
and-
back to drawing board.
do I have a second?
Second.
Is that a roll call? It is.
yes,
Roll call, please.
Chairperson Spray,
Yes.
Vice Chair Choma,
Yes.
Commissioner Lucas.
Yes.
And let the record
Okay.
show that Commissioner Palacios excused himself. from the-
Yes.
Yes. Okay, number 6, matters from staff.
I have none.
All right. Matters from commissioners.
I have a question. Do you have candidates yet for planning and zoning to fill the vacancies?
Yes, there were 4 submitted, and I forwarded those names and the letters to the mayor.
Very good.
Okay, I have a question. On the minutes of the last meeting, there was some conversation about Brian James being concerned about continuing agenda items.
Correct.
Has it been made clear to the town attorney that many times the continuation has to do with staff not having prepared anything in the month between the meetings?
I believe he's painfully aware of that fact.
Okay, because it's really not that we want to do that ever.
Yeah,
almost.
and I apologize, that was not my intention to scold the commission for doing precisely what was recommended, or if staff was not prepared, including
Mhm.
myself. I wish I could have a great streamlining ordinance for you, but I frankly don't. And the sign code there's been lots of issues that are emerging as we're moving through this process, like the right-of-way issue on state highways.
Okay,
And, well,
Move
Any-
to adjourn.
we have a motion to adjourn. Anyone want to second
I
that?
second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 This meeting is closed at 6:52
10
or
to 7.
something? 6:52 PM. Thank you all.
Thank you.
It was just way too much fun.
Mohammed Mihad. He has a brain problem. His 4 limbs, they all have the same problem.